Oh, it's good to be a part of this, Jim. Thank you so much. Everything's been going really well. Really exciting group of people that you got together. So thank you so much. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be of service and for allowing me to participate in my own recovery. Um, I'd like to start with a joke. I'm not going to hear the laughter, but I know there will be some. There was this married couple that was driving down the street, and a policeman pulled them over because the husband who was driving wasn't wearing his seatbelt. But by the time the policeman got to the front of the car, the husband had put his seatbelt on. So the husband rolls the window down and says, "Excuse me, officer, but I'm not sure why you pulled me over. I know I wasn't speeding." And the officer says, "Well, I pulled you over because you weren't wearing your seatbelt." And the driver says, "Well, you can see I'm wearing my seatbelt. I was wearing my seatbelt." So the policeman looks down into the car and says to the wife, "Excuse me, ma'am, but was he wearing his seatbelt back there when I saw him?" And the wife said, "Well, if he said he was wearing his seatbelt, he must have been wearing his seatbelt." So the policeman looks at her and makes a face and says, "Come on, he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. Why are you saying that?" And then the wife says, "Well, listen, officer, I learned years ago not to argue with my husband when he's been drinking." So that's my joke. Um, I'm going to be talking about step 10. Rich really knocked it out of the park. Everybody really knocked it out of the park. And I know the next couple speakers very well, and they're phenomenal too. So I'll try to do the best I can with step 10. Just some general thoughts about step 10. It's interesting what leads up to step 10 because really the first 9 steps are unusual in that the first 9 steps deal with the past. And then the last 3 steps deal with the present. And when we're able to deal better with the present, that brings about the future that we would want. So that's sort of how the program is set up, is the first 9 steps deal with the past and get us straight and clean so we don't have all the baggage that we came here with, and we can just be more in the moment, and we can be more present, and we can be more okay within ourselves now, today. And then the last 3 steps deal with the present. A, a way that I've heard the steps overviewed, which I really, really like, is, and some of you are not going to like this, but I really like this overview of the steps. It goes like this. The first 3 steps are AA considered. Steps 4 through 9 is AA learned. And steps 10, 11, and 12, our AA life begins. And I really like that overview of the steps because it's really not until we get to the end of the process are we really in AA, the program of AA. Are we really experiencing some of the freedoms and some of the joys and some of the real ability to live life in a successful way? So that's an overview that I really like. Also, in the 10th step, it says, continue to take personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admitted it. Notice it doesn't say, when we are wrong, we promptly explained it. You know what I mean? We need to, there's a big difference between 9th step amends and 10th step amends. So for me, it's, 9th step amends could be sort of viewed as, well, 5 years ago, I was a real idiot. I was drinking and I did some things. I wasn't myself. So, how can I set right the wrong? That's completely different than I was a complete idiot today, being a little bit more spiritually centered. And how can I set right the wrong? In my mind, 10 step amends are significantly different than 9 step amends, and bring about, in my experience, a lot more humility in regard to how we're living our life and how the steps affect us in deeper ways, I think. Also, I find it interesting that in the 4th step, it talks about a personal inventory, or rather a moral inventory, which is sort of a relationship inventory. But it's in the 10th step that we talk about a personal inventory. So in the 4th step moral inventory, we learn that the problem is not on the outside, that the problem is on the inside. Like Chris would say, my problems don't come at me, they come from me. And we learned that in the fourth and fifth step, that it's not what the people do around me that's the problem. It's what I tell myself about what they do that's the problem. In a lot of cases, I draw them to behave that way because of the way I'm behaving or not behaving, or saying and doing and all that. But in the 10th step, we now know that the problem centers in our mind and in our actions. And we look there for the start of the problem. We look there for the creation of our difficulty. And when we can deal with it from that position, we get some real true freedom and some real true satisfaction and some real contentedness in our mind and peace and all that. Stuff that wasn't very significant to me when I first got here, but that is incredibly significant now. A line that I can use that captures the essence of the 10th step, which I think is really excellent, is that when I remove my garbage promptly, my house doesn't stink. You know, we're all at home now, so I'm sure we can all appreciate that expression now a little bit more than usual. That the essence of the 10th step is that when I remove my garbage promptly, my house doesn't stink. And that's really kind of how it is. I also saw a quote one time from Bob B., and he said this, which also captures the essence of the 10th step, I think. It says, when I came into AA, they told me that every decision that I made brought me closer to or further away from my next drink. It either enhanced my recovery or caused my recovery to decrease in importance or value. So whenever I get confused or come upon an issue, I ask myself, what is the very best decision I can make to grow spiritually and promote my recovery in AA? You know, for me, it's sort of hard to separate 10 and 11. I see 10 and 11 as one step with two parts. So I'm only going to talk about 10. So since in my mind, 10 and 11 is kind of together, I might dip a little bit into both, but in my mind, that's just how it is. Both 10 and 11 create how to start the day, what to do throughout the day, how to end the day with an evening review, especially what to do throughout the day. Also, 10 and 11 is kind of funny because, some people call it a 10th step, but in reality, it's an 11th step. And what I mean by that is that some people think you do an evening review and that's a 10th step. But in the big book, that's an 11th step. The 10th step says in the big book, and I quote, it says, this brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. So the 10th step is all day long kind of step. We could do a 10th step to get back on the beam at 9 in the morning or 7 in the morning or at 1 at lunchtime or whatever. As soon as we find ourselves off the beam, as soon as we find ourselves angry or frustrated or fearful or just not feeling right about ourselves, we can look at what's going on and do something about it and get back on the beam. Now, before I move on, I want to mention something. I came upon this a while ago, and it was eye-opening to me, and also it was surprising to me in that whenever I ever heard the expression getting back on the spiritual beam, I had always thought that meant like it was some kind of like balance beam in gymnastics, that I'm on the beam and then I fall off and I have to get back on the beam. But that's actually not what it's talking about. This is a quote from one of Emmett Fox's books. And like I said, when I first read it, I was like, why is that news to me? I always in my head thought I knew what it meant to be spiritually on the beam. But he puts it more clearly and more succinctly. He says, today, most commercial flying is done on a radio beam. A directional beam is produced to guide the pilot to his destination. And as long as he keeps on this beam, he knows that he is safe, even if he cannot see around him because of fog or whatever the weather conditions are, or get his bearings in any other way. As soon as he gets off the beam in any direction, he is in danger, and he immediately tries to get back on the beam once more. So it's kind of funny to read that because, again, I always thought I knew what it meant to be on the beam, and now I find out it's completely different than what I thought. So I just wanted to share that. It's interesting because for me, the latter part of the steps, I believe in reworking the steps. I don't just work the steps once and then live in 10, 11, and 12. Uh, I try to be with all the steps and rework the steps occasionally. I've reworked the steps many times and have deeper experiences with it. And I'm grateful for that experience. At first, I thought it was work the steps once and then live in 10, 11, and 12, but that didn't work out too well for me. I plateaued and I knew that I wouldn't be able to go any further. And then when I reworked the steps in a deeper way, I uh, I was able to go further and further spiritually, and it's the only thing I've really found to help me to do that. Um, but in the last three steps, for me, it sort of has become an energetic thing. Um, when I'm around certain people, how do I feel energetically? Do they suck the life out of me? Do they make me feel sort of energetically uncomfortable, or do they nourish me energetically? Do I feel better when I walk away from certain people, and do I feel worse when I walk away from certain other people? Um, I can think of more than a few relationships and people that I've been around, and just after a while, I was just like, I just can't do it anymore. I feel completely defeated or depleted when I'm around a certain person. They're just sort of a taker, and spiritually, it's uncomfortable for me to be around them. Now, I work with new people all the time and all of that. I understand that I have to be around this energy sometimes, but in other cases, I can choose not to. And in a lot of cases, I choose not to. So for me, the last steps create my ability to have a sense inside of myself on whether a certain behavior or a certain activity or a certain person is nourishing for me or not. So uh, for me, the latter part of the steps, uh, as a matter of fact, if you read 10 and 11 very closely, it talks about the inner life completely. So, the beginning of step 10, like I said, it's as we go along. So it's throughout the day. It's not just done at night. It can be done in the morning or as soon as I feel a sense of off the beam. I have steps 4 through 9 to get back on the beam. And then it says we vigorously, notice the word vigorously, commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So it tells us that the step 10 and 11 way of life, we begin working with it as we start going out to make amends. So when I work with people, I always say that, maybe after a 4 or 5 amends, I start giving them the instructions for 10 and 11, and we talk about meditation and evening review and all this other stuff that's in 10 and 11 as a spiritual way to go through the day. And then the book gets into we have entered the world of the spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of having entered the world of the spirit. So it's talking about that at the 10th step. We've just entered the world of the spirit. So now we need to grow in effectiveness of being in the world of the spirit. We're just at the beginning of our spiritual life. This says this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for a lifetime. Now, in this one paragraph alone, it says continue 4 times. So I think they're trying to tell us something. They're saying we need to keep doing this every day for life. This is part of the 10th step. And then it says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. That sounds very similar to the 4th step. And then it says when these crop up at once, we ask God to remove them. So that sounds like 6 and 7. And then it says we discuss them with someone, which sounds like a 5th step, and then make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone, which is 8 and 9. So it lets us know that when we get off the beam, we use 4 through 9 in a quick moment by moment basis to get back on the beam again. We use that to deal with it and move on. Also notice there that it says, first we ask God to help us. And then if we're not able to kind of work through it on our own, then and only then do we call our sponsor or somebody in our network or talk to someone. So it's saying we go to God first before we go to a human for help, because we may find the help within us and with us. So we don't seek help outside of ourselves. We seek help inside of ourselves first. This is really, really important. I can't tell you how many times somebody I was working with called me with some situation, and I said to him, did you pray about this? And they said no. And a second later, I would hang up without even saying goodbye. Just like, why are you calling me? I'm not the one you're supposed to go to first. This program is about God and the steps. This isn't about me. I'm not your answer man. You need to find your own answers. This is about God and the steps. In sponsoring, that's always the emphasis for me, God and the steps. As far as I'm concerned, sponsoring is like parenting. I think what we're supposed to do is make ourselves as unnecessary as quickly as possible. And for me, that's what sponsorship is. So it's saying we go to God first. Very, very important. I've always been amazed at some of the answers that I've gotten before I even talk to somebody. Now, also, then it says, then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code. When was the last time you heard that as a topic at a meeting? Oh, what's our code? Love and tolerance of others. Let's have a discussion meeting on that. Now, you'll notice in the world of the spirit, it's talking about we have entered the world of the spirit. It talks about at once we help God to remove selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when it crops up. At once is a time frame. That's immediately. Then on the next line, it says we discuss it with someone immediately and make amends quickly. And then we resolutely turn our thoughts. In the world of the spirit, there's no room for complacency. There's no room for procrastination. If we don't respond to guidance now, and if we don't deal with blockages now, stuff starts to accumulate again, and then we get blocked, and then we're not hearing the guidance, and then we're really off, and we don't understand how do we get here again, and et cetera, et cetera. In the world of the spirit, everything needs to happen now, immediately, quickly. Really important. Then it gives us the 10-step promises. As far as I'm concerned, the 10-step promises is the Big Book's definition for what the word recovered means. So for me, this is what recovered looks like. And I have ceased fighting anything or anyone. By the way, I'm going to change a couple words to personalize it. So when it says we, I'm going to say I, so that I can experience it, not just think, we, like I'm talking about somebody else. So it says, and I have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. So that's a statement that can be turned into a question. Have I ceased fighting anything or anyone? And it says, for this time, sanity will have returned. So in other words, the ability to see the truth about alcohol and about, what's causing my problems will have returned. I will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, I recoil from it as if from a hot flame. I react sanely and normally, and I will find that this has happened automatically. I will see that my new attitude toward liquor has been given me without any thought or effort on my part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. I am neither fighting it nor am I avoiding temptation. I feel as though I've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Notice that it doesn't say there the problem's been solved. It says that the problem has been removed. Notice that it says problem singular. We only have one problem, and that's separation from the power. And we only have one solution, and that's conscious contact with the power. So in other words, we don't have a sex problem, we have a spiritual problem. We don't have a problem with our boss at work, we have a spiritual problem. We don't have a problem with alcohol, we have a spiritual problem. We don't have a problem with gambling, we have a spiritual problem. We don't have a problem with spending, we have a spiritual problem. We have one problem, and that's separation from the power. And we only have one solution, and that's conscious contact with the power. So that's what it's talking about there. See, because now we're consciously connected with the power, so the problem's been removed because separation from the power was the problem, and now we're consciously connected with the power, so the problem's been removed. The book continues. It says, it does not exist for me. I am neither cocky nor am I afraid. That is my experience. That is how I react, so long as or if I keep in fit spiritual condition. Now that's a pretty hefty condition there. let me talk for a second about what fit spiritual condition might look like. Let's take an example from the sports world. Let's take an example of what does fit physical condition look like. Let's use the example of an Olympic athlete. An Olympic athlete would be in fit physical condition. They go to extremes. They dedicate their life. They are singly focused on being the best athlete they can be. That's what fit physical condition looks like. But the book's talking here about fit spiritual condition. So this isn't some minor, mediocre kind of thing. This is dedicating our life toward. This is spending time every day growing spiritually, starting the day with prayer and meditation, starting the day asking for guidance. You know, one of the things that I do every time that I speak is that for hours, like all day, before I'm going to speak that night, is over and over and over and over again, I have a mantra that I say, and that is, Lord, may I be of service. Lord, may I be of service. I say that over and over and over and over again. And then I walk into a meeting and I'm introduced and I speak. And I keep that in mind, that I'm trying to be of service. This isn't about me. Lord, may I be of service. May I be your servant. You know, in AA, the highest attainment is servant. It's really kind of interesting because in the world, the highest attainment is way different than that. But here in AA, servant is the highest achievement. And it's a really great place to be. It's one of the most satisfying experiences I've had. I've dedicated my life with trying to help people work the steps and to help people grow spiritually as I try to work the steps and as I try to grow spiritually. It's the most satisfying. It's one of the only satisfying things I've ever found. So I'm grateful that I was introduced to that by the teachers that I found here in AA and elsewhere. So it says, now here's, this whole paragraph is a bunch of warnings. So notice what it says here. It's easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. Laurels are past achievements. I am headed for trouble if I do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. I am not cured of alcoholism. What I really have is a daily reprieve, contingent or dependent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Now, let's look at that for a second. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve. A reprieve is a temporary death sentence. So a reprieve is when the governor calls and says, you know, don't send him to the chair. That's a reprieve. So we're not talking about some minor thing here. This is almost like a life or death kind of situation. What we have is a daily reprieve, a saving of our lives, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Now, notice it doesn't say contingent on our spiritual condition. It doesn't say it all depends on how far we've come. It says the maintenance of what brings us to how far we've come to help us then go further. It's the maintenance and growth of the daily disciplines of prayer and meditation and honesty and integrity and amends and inventory and love and so many things that on a daily basis we do to be comfortable in our own skin, to then and only then stay one day at a time away from drinking. Now, this next part for me is kind of interesting in that the 10th step has 2 pages basically in the big book. You got the left page, which talks about the reactive part of step 10, which is when we get off the beam, we react by using 5 through 9 to get back on the beam again. So that's after we've already started not doing well. This is how we get back to doing well. But now this right page of step 10 talks about the proactive part of step 10 that not a lot of people talk about and not a lot of people notice. So pay attention here if you can. What it says is every day. So every day is a time frame. It's an instruction, a specific instruction. Every day. It says every day is a day when we must. Must is a pretty strong word. So every day and must. We must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. So notice what it's saying there. every day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. So one of the exercises I give people I work with is, what's God's will look like in all of your activities? So they sit down and they put, married life, parenting, kids, work, AA meetings, sponsorship, my interactions with pets and animals, how I act in traffic, how I act at my church, how I act in public in general. What's God's will for me in all areas of my life? What does it look like? Am I living up to that standard? Am I letting God into areas of my life, and other areas of life I'm not? To rephrase that, am I introducing love in certain areas of my life and not introducing love in certain other areas of my life? To use a different phrase, am I introducing honesty and truth in certain areas of my life, but certain other areas of my life I'm not introducing honesty and truth? These are just ways that we can rephrase the word God to make it more real and more immediate for us. Because sometimes the term God is just kind of generic. And yeah, I'm trying to do God's will, but what does that mean? But if I'm trying to do love's will, I kind of know what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. If I'm trying to do truth and honesty's will, I kind of know what that looks like. And even more importantly, I know what it looks like when I'm not doing it. So it makes it more practical. And then it says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. A bunch of years ago, me and a friend of mine did a step 10 and 11 retreat up at the Wilson House in East Forest, Vermont, which was born. It's a really wonderful place. If you haven't been there yet, I suggest that you go. There's 3 places in AA that I really highly recommend. One is the Wilson House in East Dorset, Vermont, which is where Bill was born and also where he's buried. And the other place is Stepping Stones, which is in Bedford Hills, New York. That's where Bill and Lois lived from 1941 until they died, and it's a National Historic location. And also Dr. Bob's house, which is in Akron, Ohio. These are the 3 sort of places that I would recommend that all AAs go to, because they're just incredible pieces of history and pieces of AA that should be experienced by all. But I was doing, me and my friend were doing a step 10 and 11. It was a whole entire weekend just on step 10 and 11. And we were studying the big book and also the 12 and 12 with 10 and 11. And I discovered something while we were doing that workshop. And what I mean is that thy will, not mine, be done is sort of the AA mantra. A mantra is a word or a phrase that is spiritually powerful. And as far as I see, the AA mantra is God's will, not mine, be done. And what I found in studying the 12 and 12 in the big book is that in step 10 in the big book, it says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. In step 11 in the big book, it says, thy will be done. In step 2 in the 12 and 12, it says, thy will be done. In step 3 of the 12 and 12, it says, thy will, not mine, be done. Step 10 in the 12 and 12, not my will, but thine be done. And in step 11 in the 12 and 12, thy will, not mine, be done. It says it over and over and over again. And I don't know if there's anywhere else in the comparison of step 10 and 11 in the big book and the 12 and 12. I don't know if there's any other phrases that are repeated, but in 10 and 11 in the big book, it says, thy will, not mine, be done. And in 10 and 11 of the 12 and 12, it says, thy will, not mine, be done. This is a really great mantra to work with on a daily basis. Also, I've always found it interesting that I've been sober for 28 years. I got sober June 3rd, 1991. And I've only found one group that actually uses the AA Serenity Prayer. And what I mean by that is, I think it's at the end of the second step, is the AA Serenity Prayer. And the Serenity Prayer in the that we all know and use usually is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And then it stops there. But in the 12 and 12, which is the AA version of the Serenity Prayer, which nobody uses, is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. That's the Serenity Prayer that is in our literature. And I encourage all of you to bring it to your home group and say, instead of ending with the serenity prayer that's used everywhere. That in AA we have a version of the serenity prayer that has an added line at the end that enhances it and makes it actually a better prayer, and that is "Thy will, not mine, be done" at the end of the serenity prayer in the 12 and 12. So I encourage all of you to educate yourself that we actually have our own version of the serenity prayer. Why don't we use it? It's just a personal beef of my own. I'm a historian, so this is the kind of things I'm into. I'm sorry. Again, this part of the tech step, which is the proactive part of step 10, is if I'm already doing God's will in all my activities, I'm not going to find a lot of selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, because I'll be dealing with it and seeing it ahead of time before it starts to crop up and before I act out on it. I'm already centered, and I'm not acting in a fearful way, which is where resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and the character defects generally come from. There's many spiritual paths and religions and stuff that talk about that. All the positive traits come from love, and all the character defects come from fear. They can kind of all be boiled down as the root. Love and fear is the root of all positive and negative attributes. If we're trying on a daily basis to every day carry the vision of God's will, then we're not going to be falling off the beam so easily. So this is the proactive part of step 10 that a lot of people miss. And I always love talking about it just because, the 4 through 9, when I fall off the beam thing, is pretty well known in AA, but a lot of people don't see this part of it, which is the proactive aspect of step 10, which is another thing that we could add to our spiritual practice on a daily basis, the daily disciplines. It's interesting because this one day at a time thing in regard to 10 and 11, in the beginning, one day at a time is, we just try not to drink one day at a time. But then after we're here for a while and we start getting into the steps and into the spiritual growth, the one day at a time is, how are we living? Are we making spirituality a priority? Are we making love a priority? Are we making honesty and truth a priority? Are we making unselfishness a priority on a daily basis? That if with 28 years now, if I want to not drink one day at a time, I could easily just do nothing one day and not drink that day. But if I want to not drink for the rest of my life, there's a bunch of stuff I need to be doing on a daily basis to help one day at a time to bring about the result of never drinking again. And it's a lot of the stuff that I really talked about and that some of the previous speakers talked about also. So let me give you some examples. Just one from the past pops into my head. It was around the time when I was 3.5 years sober was when I first was introduced to the big book, and that was when I first went through the steps. The interesting thing about that was almost 25 years ago, or it was 25 years ago. And what happened to me that first time through the steps was so incredibly wonderful that I still can't stop talking about it. I'm obsessed with the importance of the steps and spiritual growth, and what I see as what is really AA. Because I'm sorry to say this, but if you're in AA and you've never done the steps, can you really consider yourself a member of a 12-step fellowship? I mean, there's places that I know of. There's places that I know of not far from where I live that the steps are just not a priority. They're not important. They're even put down at times as something that some people do at some point in the future, but it's just not important right now, if at all. And I can't imagine a more not AA message, but I know that it exists in AA. So I appreciate workshops like this that are really emphasizing people having experiences with the process, because this is the transformative part of the program. In AA, it's like the circle and triangle. We have the base of the triangle is the program or recovery or the 12 steps. The left side of the triangle is unity or the fellowship, which is going to meetings and interacting with AAs outside of the meetings. And then you have the right side of the triangle, which is service, which is giving of yourself, expecting nothing in return. This is the meat and potatoes of what we have to offer here. In other words, on a daily basis or on a regular basis, whenever I talk about it, I have to ask myself, where am I in all three parts of the solution? Where am I currently in the steps? Currently, where am I currently in the amount of meetings I'm going to? Where am I currently in being of service? Not just in AA, but in all of our affairs. If I'm involved currently in all three parts of the program, that I'm in the most solid position I could be in to not go back to drinking. But whenever I eliminate one or two or all three of the three-part solution that AA has to offer, which is the steps, the meetings, and the service, then it's like a three-legged stool that if I shorten one of the legs or eliminate one of the legs or two of them, the stool is going to fall over. It's not ideal, and it's not over a period of time. It's not going to work, as far in my experience. I've never known someone who is currently involved in all three sides of the solution that ever went back to drinking. So that's all I want to say about that. But the last three steps for me are really phenomenal. And just to give an example, just after I had done a fifth step and was working with 6 and 7 and started making amends, I was living with someone and their son, and that day she was off from work, and I was going to work, and I was running a little bit late, and the kitchen was sort of between the bedroom and the bathroom, so I was taking a shower and trying to get dressed and kind of going back and forth, and every time I went through the kitchen, she was somewhere where she was kind of blocking me from my forward motion, and I remember I was kind of short with her that day because she wasn't doing anything, and now she's stopping me from getting to work, and I was running a little bit late, and I was kind of a little bit short with her. I wasn't so spiritually centered that morning. And then when I was on my way to work, I remember an elderly gentleman with a hat. I'm sorry to sound prejudiced, but an elderly gentleman with a hat was going the speed limit instead of what I think is the speed limit, which is a little bit over. And then when I got to work, my boss wanted something yesterday, and I was kind of spitting bullets. It was like 9 a.m. and I'm just like pissed. And in that moment, I realized, wait a minute, I'm off the beam. This is just going to accumulate like a big, huge snowball on the top of a hill. The more it goes down the hill, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and worse and worse. And I wasn't short with my boss or anything like that, but I did honk my horn at the guy with the car. And I have no way to find him. But I called my girlfriend at the time, and I said, listen, sweetie, I was short with you this morning. It hadn't anything to do with you. I'm really sorry. I was just in a hurry, and I kind of took it out on you, and I'm sorry. And then, I just got on with my day, and it wasn't so bad anymore. It wasn't something now I'm carrying, and by 1 o'clock, I'm really pissed, and then I experienced something at lunchtime, and now I'm super pissed, and then all of a sudden it's it's a 5 p.m. and I'm looking to leave work, and I'm just spitting bullets. I'm just really pissed because I let it all accumulate. It talks in 10 and 11 that we have to see when it's happening or before it happens. We have to be so sensitive to what's going on within us, in our minds, in our emotions, in our heart, in our spirit. We have to be so in touch with what's going on inside of us that we see it before or when it happens, and then we could prevent it from happening. And if it does happen, if I act out or lash out or whatever, I can immediately deal with it and then go on with my day. I don't wait until the end of the day to do that. I can do it in the moment. As soon as I realize I'm off, I deal with it immediately, and then I'm back on the beam again, and then everything's really cool. And that day, 9 o'clock, 5 minutes of 9, I was freaking, and 5 minutes after 9, I was all right again. And this is the beauty of our program, and this is the beauty of the 10th step, and the beauty of the spiritual way of life. Now, I want to be quick to point out, I don't always like it. This is really important for me. we're emoting kind of people. Like we have to feel like it in order to do something. No, no, I got to do it whether I feel like it or not. Personally, I have to do it whether I feel like it or not. It doesn't matter what I feel like doing. I have to get back to the beam, because then and only then can I be of service to God and those that are around me. Can I be who I think God always intended me to be, that I never really lived up to that, and sometimes don't even recognize still today. So that's just an example, and I can give a million examples. I think 8 months ago I started dating somebody, and I think I've gotten pretty good now at when when um, when I'm not 100%, when I'm short, when I when I um, when I say something that I shouldn't, when I'm not considerate, when I'm focused on me instead of being focused on her. I think I've gotten really, really good at real quickly just saying, listen, sweetie, I'm really sorry. I was kind of short with you. It didn't have anything to do with you. I was just off, and we can talk about it or whatever. But I try to work really, really hard, especially in a close personal relationship, to really focus on uh, keeping the street clean, because then and only then are we going to have a chance. Because the last thing I want is the one I love, the one I'm closest to, the one that I want to spend the rest of my life with. The last thing I want is for her to be uncomfortable around me. I want to make things completely calm and completely good. And just to share a joy, I just want to mention Audrey's on the line with us, and I just wanted to mention that you guys aren't going to believe this, but a couple weeks ago, my girlfriend got down on her knee and she asked me to marry her, and she gave me a ring. So how cool is that? I don't want to say that this is what the spiritual life looks like, because it's not, this is kind of way, way beyond the greatness of the spiritual life or whatever. But I just wanted to share a joy that I just got engaged, and it's a wonderful thing. I look forward to spending the rest of my life with her, hopefully. And that's all I have. Thank you for letting me share.